Welcome back to another episode of the Engineering Future Podcast. I'm your host, Duque. And this week's episode, I talked to Isaac. He is a civil engineer that is creating a lot of resources for the FE and the P exams, as well as currently working a full-time job. And we met on LinkedIn. We've been networking for a little while, and I was recently on an episode of his for his podcast, so I will make sure I link down in the description below. And it was just great talking to him because he has the experience of being a full-time civil engineer, as well as helping all these students and young engineers pass their exam. So he has a lot of experience on kind of that process that I just went through, and I just kind of wanted to hear his feedback. I know I've been having quite a bit of episodes on the P exam, and this one kind of ties everything kind of together. I think it was a really interesting episode because we talked both about some of the things to consider when you first graduate from school and are thinking about starting to study for your PE license and starting getting the rhythm of maybe getting your either, if you didn't get the FE, get the FE and the PE after that, and what happens after you take the PE, because I think that's a big question that a lot of students have, a lot of engineers have, young engineers have, and is, okay, I got my license. Now, what's next? What can I do with the license? What are the next steps? And we definitely cover a little bit on the beginning of the career when you're kind of getting ready for the P exam. Some of the things to know and really understand when you are taking the exam, as well as we spend quite a bit of time on this episode kind of talking about that next step. What happens when you get the P exam? Do you get promoted to a manager position? Do you get promoted to a project manager position? Do you get a pay raise? Some of these questions that I know a lot of you have if you are in this period of either thinking about taking the exam or you just took the exam and just want some answers on that. So we spent quite a bit of time just talking about what comes after the exam, some of the things to know, some of the things you can do as a young engineer that are going to set you up for success when you take the exam, as well as before you take the exam. So definitely a great episode. I was very happy to talk with Isaac and just really get to know some of his ideas and some of his just knowledge around this topic and what happens before and after the exam. And like I said, Isaac has a lot of resources for the FE and the P exam, and I'll make sure I link everything on the show notes. It's going to be a show notes loaded with a lot of great information related to resources, related to courses. So like I mentioned, he has a lot of resources for the FE and the P exam. He has some courses that he's put together to help students and young engineers pass this exam. So I'll make sure I linked everything in the description below. Help you find his website, help you find the courses. If you are an engineer that is currently thinking about taking the exam, make sure you check those links below. He has some amazing courses, and it's surprisingly how invested he is in helping you pass the exam, working with you and kind of walking you through this process. And like he mentioned in this episode, he didn't pass the exam on the first try. And we kind of touch about that a little bit and how his experience has allowed you to really relate to the students that don't pass it the first time. And he even mentioned someone that hasn't passed it 8 times. So it really, like we talked on a previous episode with Vanessa, just don't be discouraged if you don't pass the first time. It is a process. You're already becoming a better engineer by going through these, to studying, and we touch also about that on this episode. So I think it's a great episode, even if you are not even close to taking the PE, or if you took the PE and are 2-3 years beyond that point. This episode has a little bit of everything for anyone between graduation up to like 4 or 5 years after taking the PE. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If at any point you're really enjoying the conversation, make sure you take a screenshot on your podcast player, share it on social media, and tag Isaac and I, Civil Engineering Academy, and my handle is Luis Duque EAT. So without further ado, let's jump right into the conversation with Isaac today. Welcome to the Engineering Our Future podcast, a podcast where I bring you relevant content from personal experience and guests to help young engineers, students, and international students succeed in their careers. So welcome back to another episode of the Engineering Our Future podcast. I have Isaac with me here today. I'll be talking about the FE, the P exam. He has a lot of information, courses, and everything, and kind of the transition after that. As you know, I just took the exam and I passed it, and kind of looking into what's next in the career of a young engineer who just passed an exam and are looking to either move on into a management position or kind of what's next in the career. So Isaac, you just want to give us a quick introduction, what you do as a civil engineer, and as well as your business, Civil Engineering Academy.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here. You know what? Civil engineering is a great field to be in. I think it's an exciting field to be in. What I do for a living is I actually work in the utility world as a transmission engineer. So a lot of engineers don't know what that is. And what that is we design the high voltage power lines that you typically see in rural areas or along the freeways. Those things actually have to be designed by somebody, and that specific field is the area that I've gone into. I've been in there for a long time, but I've also done project management. I've been a supervisor as well, and so the career I've had has just kind of bounced into different arenas. And right now, I am actually back into engineering, doing transmission design work again because I have really enjoyed it. On the side of all of that, I started a website called Civil Engineering Academy. When I went through the exam back when I took it, it was a struggle, and I understand the struggle for engineers taking that exam, along with the FE. But I wanted to be kind of a guy in the trenches to help other people. So I started Civil Engineering Academy kind of with the thought that I wanted to help people pass their exams. And it's just kind of grown from there. So we've created some courses to help people with the FE and PE exam. We started YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff like that to really help people on their journey to become a professional engineer, kind of no matter what stage you're at. So that's kind of where we're at, and we're excited to keep that going. Life is busy. I got 4 kids, and we just had a newborn. I have 3 girls and a little boy, and maybe he'll be an engineer. Who knows? But life is good, and life is busy.
Yeah, that's great, and yeah, I think it's just super important, kind of what you're doing with the FE and the P exam. I know I struggle a lot, just kind of finding resources that were available for me. Different reasons, COVID and all the restrictions on the exam this year, I ended up not being able to get into the ASE course they do here at the ASE local chapter, and not find really a study group, which was really tough, because I really recommend people trying to find a group where they can bounce ideas, ask questions, and especially if you're in an industry that's different to the other people. Like for me, structural, finding people in transportation, water resources, just kind of ask these questions. So for me, it was just hard to just study by myself. So it's great to see that you have a lot of resources that people can check out, and I'm sure you have a place where people can ask questions and all of that. So I'd really encourage people to find just a group and some accountability during studying for the exam, which is I think very encouraged. Let's start at the beginning. So when students graduate from college, what are some of the things they should keep in mind to like set a solid foundation for the career? Maybe they just passed the FE exam. They're trying to develop those technical skills kind of early on in their career, and knowing they will be taking the PE exam in 3-4 years from then. What are some of the things they should keep in mind to set just a really solid foundation in terms of like technical knowledge, as well as just career plan overall when they start their careers?
Yeah, so career planning and really getting this PE under their belt should start at a very early stage. And when you're finishing up school and you're looking for a job, a career path, you need to do a couple things. One of them is that you need to make sure that you're going to find a place that actually has PE engineers there, licensed engineers, because you will need somebody to sign off on the work that you will be doing in order to get your license. And this is something that some people don't realize initially. Maybe they think it's a given, but I know smaller places, there are some places where it's really hard to find someone with the PE that's going to sign off on your stuff. And so go in, if you're going to go find a job, make sure that the PE is top of mind. And when you're doing interviews, I'd even ask, what's the journey, what's the plan, who are licensed engineers here, so that you can set a solid foundation in starting to document. This is another thing, is starting to track the work that you are doing, because at some point you'll have to apply for your license even after, during, depends on the state, but you will have to apply for that, and you'll have to document your experience. And so, try to keep track of that a little bit, so when you do apply, you have some of that under your belt. Otherwise, you're going to have to rack your brain a little bit about all the projects you've worked on, and you might forget a couple things. So anyway, that's some good advice to get started, at least as you're preparing your career and getting ready for the PE. In terms of technical knowledge, what you're finding right now is that states are slowly, not all states, but some states are decoupling the exam from the experience. And so you'll find some states where you can take the exam relatively quickly, like California or Arizona. But most states are decoupling it, meaning that you can take the exam earlier, but you still have to wait for the experience to kick in. Most states, it's 4 years, 4 years of working experience before you can actually become a licensed engineer. And so, most engineers usually wait the 4 years to go take the exam. And a lot of times by that time, a lot of engineers have forgotten a lot of knowledge, forgotten a lot of technical stuff. And so my advice is, if you are in a state that allows you to take it early, which you'll need to go look at your own state's Division of Professional Licensing, I'd recommend trying to get it done as soon as possible, because it's still top of mind. You haven't forgot a lot of other subject areas that you don't necessarily use at work all the time. And that's going to help get you a leg up if you can get that thing over with earlier. But, don't be set back by the fact that if you're going to wait 4 years, you're going to go take it. That shouldn't, prevent you from doing it in the first place. But those are some tips that I have as people are starting their career or getting a job as they're starting this adventure.
Yeah, and I was talking to another engineer last week. We both took exam recently, and it's been 3 years since I graduated from school. When you get a master's degree, you can count that as a 1 year of experience. People to just realize that. And it was really hard to start studying because obviously I haven't been out of school for 3 years, have a family now, and some of this stuff is just far removed from actually sitting in a classroom studying. It's just so hard. So I had to basically retrain myself at the beginning of my studying sessions and figure out what worked for me in terms of studying, what were some best practices for taking the exam, and trying to reteach myself all of these things. I actually had a mentee that lives in Illinois, and they can take it basically right away after they graduate from school. So his experience was, I think, a lot smoother. Maybe he didn't have quite the technical experience from being in a job for 3-4 years, but he was already a student. He was in the mindset. Basically everything you should know for the PE, you're learning that in school. And a lot of times it's easier to just get out of school, maybe sharpen your pencil on a few things, a few areas that are critical for the exam, and then take the exam rather than just spend a few years out of school trying to figure out some of these things. So I think that's a great advice. If you're able to take the exam right away, I know there's a handful of states that let you take it right away. I know California, you only need 3 years. So finding what works best for you, I think it's crucial. Obviously, as the longer you wait, the more things are gonna come up in life, family, work, maybe a little more time intensive. Maybe you are a little more advanced in your career and you have to spend a lot more time at work. So the faster you can get that out of the way, I think is super important. Another thing I wish I had done a lot earlier was, like you said, keeping track of my experience and keeping track of all the projects I did, what I did, and kind of showing that progressive experience, which is what they want to see on the application. And I started doing this, maybe 2.5 years ago, which wasn't too bad. I think I just missed that first year out of school, but having record of everything, I think is super important. That's going to make the application a lot easier.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, because you don't really see a lot of engineers, people that are working like you, creating those courses for the FE and the PE exam, and putting so much time into helping students and helping young engineers kind of go through this process of taking the exam. I'm sure on your end, it takes a lot of time helping them study, helping them problems. I don't know what exactly course entails, but why did you decide to create the Civil Engineering Academy, and what was your motivation behind it?
Well, I actually, when I first took the exam, I stunk it up. I was really bad at it. And I was one of these guys that wanted to take it early and get it over with. And I am in Utah. And when I found out I could take it in Arizona, I was like, I'm sold. So I'm going down there to take it. And I learned a few lessons because I didn't properly prepare very well. Went down there and just got slapped in the face with my results. And I really realized the effort and the energy that needed to go into this. And so as a repeat taker, I kind of just understood that there were some frustrations that go along with that. I mean, if you go look at what the published results are from NCES, as a repeat taker, they do not look good. Like the average pass rate is around 65 to 70% for first time takers, and repeat takers is like half of that. So people get discouraged very quickly if they have to take this exam again, just looking at those numbers. So, you're probably getting the best people passing the first time, and people that have to repeat it again have to put in some effort. But there's also probably some mental challenges that people have to get over when they repeat the exam. Maybe they don't want to put in as much effort because they already studied for 6 months and they just are dreading having to do that again. But this was the reason why I wanted to start it, because I saw there was frustration there. I was frustrated having to spend so much time and energy and money go through it myself. And so I said, well, I want to try to help people. And so I started with the site, started with one exam, and eventually we started making courses, came out with a PE review course. And we offer practice problems where I was showing people how to use the SERM, pulling equations out of the SERM. Eventually that will go away because we're using, it'll be computer based here in 2022. But just trying to get in the trenches and show people really how to use problems with the most common references that were being used, and teaching people how to tab those things up. So, and then just giving really good advice through the modules that we have, and then giving lots of support. So we do have a free group for people. If they do want to join, they can help each other out there. It's at ceacommunity.com. Or you can, if you're part of the courses that we offer, we have private support groups in there for each examinee. And we really try to support people. What I have found very interesting is that we have a lot of people that are repeat takers, and most people don't want to admit that. And I think a lot of people don't want to admit that because a lot of people think that you're not a good engineer if you had to take this exam a couple of times. And we've had people in the course that have taken the exam up to 8 times. That's kind of the highest I've seen so far, but have gotten over the hurdle of doing that. And so it's been fun for me to see people come in. I can relate to them because I've been a repeat taker myself and understand the frustrations with that whole process, and then just try to encourage them to keep moving forward. If I could, label a couple mistakes that I see when people are trying to prepare for this, is a lot of people that take it, they know the maybe the particular depth exam they want to take, and then they fail it, and then they ask and they start questioning whether they took the right depth exam, or if they switch the depth exam, or something's going to be easier for them if they switch it. And they took that depth exam for a reason, whether that's what applied to their career, or what they felt like they were pretty decent at. And my advice to those guys is always my advice is to stick with the exam that you took before. Like, if you have failed with that particular exam, you've already learned a lot of stuff that you're going to have to relearn if you change it up. You understand the look, the feel, the type of questions that are asked, and all of these things that come out of that. So just having gone through the experience, you've gained a lot of knowledge, and you're throwing that kind of all away if you're changing lanes a little bit. And, I'm not, if people want to change the lanes, that's fine. You can do that. I'm just telling you, my advice would be to try to stick with it and do it again, and eventually you'll get it. So anyway, did I answer your question? Hopefully I did.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice, and I'm very happy to hear that you're helping really showing these students and young engineers that it doesn't really matter if you didn't pass the exam the first time. I talked about this in a previous episode when I didn't know the results at the time, but just the fact of taking the exam, going through studying hundreds of hours, I just believe that that's already making you a better engineer. You are kind of understanding better the concepts. You are putting the time and the effort to go through all of this effort to study for this exam. And I think that just teaches you so many things beyond what the exam or the grade of the exam can really give to you. You're being like working so hard to study. You are learning probably a lot of new information when you're taking the practice problem, the practice exams, and just on top of that, being consistent and just learning some of these other skills that honestly passing the exam is not really going to give you. Just like setting a schedule, being accountable, being responsible for like studying for all of these things. And I just think that all of that is already making you a better engineer. And I've talked to, I don't know how many professional engineers on these podcasts, but at least from 4 or 5, I've heard that they didn't pass it the first time. And at least another handful that they didn't pass the FE the first time when they were students. So the pass rate, like you said, is like 60 or 70% the first time. That's not very high. Like there's just too many people that there's too many people showing they pass the exam and not enough people showing they didn't pass the exam. And I'm always thankful for the people that are honest and like you that are just sharing that they didn't pass the exam and just learning from from those mistakes, because that's honestly that's what engineering is. Like hundreds, thousands of years we're learning from many mistakes, and every time we just kind of iterate into making it a lot better as you go. So I'm very happy that to hear, I mean, 8 times, that's an incredible amount of effort to pass the exam, but I'm sure that when they passed it, they were completely overjoyed and ready to continue their careers.
Oh man, can you imagine that? I mean, it's a huge weight off of your shoulders when you have spent that long to get this hurdle over with, and then all of a sudden it's done. You know, it's an awesome thing to see. So
yeah, that's fantastic, and it's just great that you are just there with the students, with the young engineers, kind of putting your time and effort into really walking with them through this process. As you, I'm sure you have had hundreds, maybe thousands of students on your courses and everything. Maybe what are some of the mistakes that they're making either before the exam or like if they didn't pass the first exam and after the exam? What are some of the most like common mistakes you've seen the students or young engineers make when they're either preparing or after taking the exam?
Yeah, well, there's a few, I think, and I can trace them back to my own mistakes that I made when I was going through the journey. The first mistake that people make is they do not take the exam seriously. If you go in the exam, unless you're like a savant or a genius, very rarely can you just walk in without much preparation and pass this thing. There's always that one guy at the office that you hear about that was like, oh yeah, I studied for like a week and then I went and took it and I passed. And I just don't have a hard time believing that one. So the first mistake that people make is that they don't take it serious enough. And the second mistake that I typically see is that people don't set a schedule. And what I mean by that is creating a schedule based on the specifications. Get your butt back into homework gear and start building a schedule so you can study problems, which is the third thing, is not practicing enough problems. And this ties into, practice exams. I will always recommend to people that you need to take a practice exam like the real environment and put yourself under pressure with a timer to take the practice exam. And you can break this up. I did it on the weekends, but you could take, a 2-hour or a 4-hour shot at solving a certain amount of problems and see if you can get those under your belt. And the same thing with the depth exam, but you have to put yourself in a situation where you're timing yourself and seeing how far you can get and how well you do, because you're preparing yourself for game day when you're going to be under the clock and doing the same thing. And so those are some of the mistakes I see and some of the advice I'd have for people like starting out and doing this.
Yeah, that's super important. It just like what you said, just reminds me when I used to play tennis since like age 8 to like 21, and all the coaches always like remind us like, you don't really practice for 30 minutes and then expect to be playing a match for 2-3 hours. Like you need to practice for 4 or 5 hours so you're well equipped to go to a match for like 2.5 hours. So always going the extra mile and maybe studying maybe a little longer than you think you need to. So when you come to the exam, you're already in the zone and know like how you, like just how your body feels sitting for 8 hours in a day and just thinking really hard about all these problems. How I tackled that was I did some studying during the week, but I just couldn't. It was too late at night. It was sometimes like children running around the house screaming and everything. So it wasn't really productive. So I tried my best to study 4 days during the week, Monday through Thursday, for at least 2-3 hours max. I couldn't really get much beyond that without falling asleep on my books, honestly. And then I took, honestly, this Saturday, I went to the office and from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. for about a month and a half, just focused on studying, solving a lot of problems, I actually did 3 full exams, just like real exams starting at 8 a.m. to noon, taking a break for lunch, and then going in the afternoon and do it again. And I think it's really helpful just to take, even if you don't do the project exam, just taking like this Saturday just to study the whole day puts you in the mindset of, okay, this is how my body's going to feel. I know at 2:30 or 3 p.m. I'm just going to be super tired and maybe I need to drink some coffee at that time or have an energy drink or something to wake me up. But you just start seeing how your energy like fluctuates during the day and you start to understand how your body is reacting to all this stress you're putting into the exam and the knowledge that or the hard work you're putting into really solving all these problems. I honestly felt horrible through most of the practice exams, most of the practice problems. I don't think I did very good, but I think just knowing what I could expect in the exam and just putting the time and effort was a huge benefit just to be more prepared for the exam. So that's something I've told many people and encourage, at least take maybe the 4 Saturdays before the exam and just study the whole day to start getting prepared and ready for the exam.
Yeah, I mean, if you treat it like a part-time job, which is what you kind of did, you're going in the office, you're studying. If you're treating it like a part-time job, which is kind of what it is, then you're studying 10 to 20 hours a week, and that's what you're doing. So get the family on board. Sounds like you did that. It's an important goal not only for you but your family. It can take a toll on family members if you're married and you have to keep repeating this exam. Can you imagine what that sacrifice is like for people to have to do that? So get everybody on board with this, and if that means trying to figure out babysitting routines and whatnot to make this work, that's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah, honestly, I've been telling people like you cannot do this by yourself. Like you need your family on board, you need your coworkers on board, you need friends around you helping and supporting you. Either that are taking the exam or not taking the exam. It's just a lot of effort, and honestly, it's I don't think anyone can do it by themselves. So I think that's some great advice.
Yes.
So
hey, you need to play tennis against my wife, by the way.
Does she play tennis?
She's played tennis probably about as long as you have.
We're close to Utah, so I may have to drive down there and play some tennis. I haven't played tennis in about 5 years, so it's been a while. But I played it for so long that I think I probably can still do okay.
She played for the University of Utah, so you guys, got that tennis stuff in common.
Yeah, I played for South Dakota State University for a couple of years at least.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't think we never really travel out west too much. I think we traveled to Denver a couple of times, but yeah, definitely. I'm always trying to find people to play tennis with. So if we're ever in the same town, yeah.
I'm not good enough.
Yeah, definitely. So once you take the FE exam or the P exam and pass, let's talk about the P exam. I think we kind of cover what comes out of the FE, kind of preparing for the PE. You pass the P exam. In your opinion, like what's next? Like if you want to either become a manager or just as someone that is maybe in a higher position at the company, like a technical lead or like a project manager,
okay.
What comes after the exam?
Yeah, so after you get your PE, Now, this depends on where you're working, because some places immediately give you a raise. They recognize the PE as a very important piece of their company and as you as an individual, and they'll give you a raise. Other companies do not. I worked for a utility, and it was highly encouraged to get the PE license, but there was no raise associated with that. But what I can tell you is that the PE is the springboard to the rest of your career, and it will open up doors where there weren't doors open before. And if an employer is comparing, let's say, someone with a master's degree to someone with a PE license, who are they going to choose? They're going to choose the guy with the license, because the world values that. That's what's, that's what you're stamping. That says this was reviewed by an engineer that knows what he's talking about. And so it's this springboard for the rest of your career. It's going to open doors for you, even if maybe you're not happy where you're at. It will open doors to other places. And if you're considering going into management, what a PE does is it's going to launch your career, but it's going to help you move up in that technical position, most likely first. After you've gained some years of experience, then those manager positions slowly open to you. It does take time to get into those positions, but if you are aiming to become a manager, they definitely want you to have experience, to have worked for the company for some time, and then you can get into those management roles. But I will say that if you have your PE license, and let's say you wanted to pivot your career and you want to be a project manager, those doors are wide open as well. If you've got experience in your technical background and you want to maybe shoot for a project management position, that's open for you as well. And having a license is just a leg up on a lot of other people when you can say you've got a technical background in the project management field. From there, it's just a matter of experience and years of service, and these doors kind of open up to all over the place depending on what you want to get into. So to think that you're just locked in to being a civil engineer is probably not the right way to think about it, because it's going to branch out into a lot of different areas depending on where you want to go. So that's my advice about like where you're headed, what's after the PE license, and there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and I guess with that, keeping that in mind, when do a young engineer, I just passed the exam, I'm starting to get more comfortable with design, the company I'm working for. How do I know I am ready to start kind of becoming a manager or just taking just some additional responsibility? Like, it's really hard to judge. It's not like before and after the exam, like, the exam gets the license, but it's really hard to judge when you're ready to take that additional responsibility and when you're ready to start climbing that corporate ladder, if you will. How do you know when you're ready?
I would say, I mean, this is just me thinking out loud, but if you are extremely comfortable in the position that you're at, and what I mean by that is that you know that whatever task is coming at you, you're solving. It's like a routine now. I would say at that point, when the position has become a little more routine for you because you know it so well, maybe it's time to challenge yourself with either a management position or talking to your boss about additional work or experiences that they could bring to you that would challenge you, because some people do like to stay the engineering route, and that's totally fine, which typically branches into like a principal engineer, and then you become the subject matter expert of what you're studying. And so if that's the route you want to go, then yeah, go talk to your manager and find out what opportunities or what other experiences that they can hopefully give to you that would expand you, challenge you a little bit further. But I would say at the time that you feel like you've got it, or things become a little more routine, it's probably a signal that you are ready for either additional challenge, or you're ready to move on, or you're ready to take the next step, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I've switched jobs a few times since I graduated from school, and the first job that I had, I was kind of like a full-time intern, so I didn't really get like the full experience, which is for a few months. But my first, I call like real engineering job, where I was kind of there for the long run, I started noticing that after a year or so, I was starting to feel more comfortable doing kind of those repeated tasks. Obviously, I still needed quite a bit of assistance from the project manager and everything, but I felt like after a year, I started getting more comfortable. And about 18 months, that's kind of where I felt like I could handle some of these smaller projects kind of on my own and didn't need that much supervision. And that's been similar into like the new job that I have right now, where I think the first 6 months were just a complete blur. It's just so hard to wrap your head around new concepts, new designs, and everything. But yeah, as time goes on, and it just feels great when you start feeling that you are able to kind of get the work done without too much friction and uncertainty ahead of you. And I think that's, in my case, I feel like that's being a good sign that at least you're going the right direction. And I think the product manager, the supervisors you work with, are going to start feeling the same way, and they're going to start giving you more responsibilities, more freedom to kind of take, like make your own decisions in some of these projects. Obviously, they have to review everything when you're not a PE, but taking and feeling like is I think it's more of a feeling on your part of how you feel, and obviously the project manager will have a more like they'll review everything and making sure it's correct, and that will give you kind of the confidence of saying, yes, I feel like I'm doing great, and like my design is correct. Like, it doesn't have a lot of mistakes. So I think like what you said, it's more of a feeling. It's more of like takes time, and talking to your manager, talking to your supervisor. It's more of kind of the way, at least in my case, I've seen these kind of unfolds.
Yeah, and I'll add one just thing to that is I've seen people in the workplace that are reactive to, opportunities, but if you're proactive in your job responsibilities, those things go a long way, and your manager notices those things. And I will tell you that over time, management changes and personnel change, and there will be opportunities at certain points in your life, and those they'll know that if you're being proactive and maybe you need to get out on a site but you don't want to go out on the site, go out on the site. You know what I mean? Go out there and see what's going on. And those kind of things will carry you into these other opportunities where they will like you to apply for those. So try to be proactive in what you're doing, and it's going to carry you and give you better opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. What advice do you have for engineers that are really wanting to go into the management side instead of just staying in with the technical side? Do you have any advice and just recommendations of what they should keep in mind as they pursue that side of engineering?
Yeah, so management is different than your technical engineering side of things. If you're going to go into management, it's more about procedures and people and trying to become a better leader. In some places, they just want a manager, where you're going to be managing how we do things here. But what you typically will need for those positions is you're going to be working more on some of your people skills, and that includes more talking to people, more organizing, dealing with raises and bonuses and personal one-on-one reviews with people. Some people don't like that, and some people are okay with that. Typically the manager route is a little more lucrative, and there is a reason for that. You have to deal with some ups and downs with things, but it is a good route to go. I'm not here to discourage anybody to go into management. I think it's a really good route to go. I was a supervisor myself in the utility industry that I was in, and I had to learn a lot of new rules because I was over a group of people that were unionized, and so they had a whole separate set of rules that they followed outside of the company. And so that brought with it different challenges too, like overtime hours and per diem costs. Like, these are the little HR kind of things that you get to know as a manager. So you have to get to know policies a lot better within your workplace. You have to know people a little bit better in the workplace. And that's really what the manager level kind of dives into, is those areas. I will say that if you go into management, it's typically a progression. And when you do get into management, you do step away a little bit from engineering. And so the engineering tasks that you're typically doing will fall to engineers that are doing those daily, and not necessarily you as a manager. So that's another thing to keep in mind, because some people get into management and they feel like they're losing some of their skill, because they're a manager now. But oftentimes that's just the natural progression of you as an engineer moving into management. It's nice that you have that background though, and you can help people as you need it.
So you're telling me engineers can manage people and not only sit on a desk for 8 hours a day doing calculations?
Yeah, they can manage people all over the place.
I think it's so funny because, I mean, you probably heard that a lot, just engineers that, or the outside perspective engineers that are people that just sit on the desk, do engineering the full day and then kind of go home. But there's a lot beyond just that. And even as a young engineer with 3-4 years of experience, I see a lot of these skills coming in handy, like even now, just talking with people I need to coordinate, like my team and the people that I'm working with, and clients sometimes, and just talking to all these people. And like, I need to know the technical stuff, but there's so much beyond just numbers in our profession. There's going to conferences. I think is one of the most amazing things that engineers can do and present either research or work and everything. And I'm always amazed when people think that engineers just sit on a desk for 8 hours a day, do math, and that's all they do. So it's always great to see people like you just at least saying it and showing with like the Civil Engineering Academy and doing all those things. So it's important to share those experiences. Yep.
You can do outside of engineering. I mean, you don't have to be cranking out calculations all day. Engineers, well, the beauty of engineers is that they have inherent skills that come with engineering going through school that translate very well to a lot of different areas. And you may not realize that or not, but you have grit. You know what I mean? You broke through school. You went through the hoops and you went through that, and that's a tough challenge. You went through these big exams. Like, that means you can get through hard things, and when challenges come up, you can get through them. So whether that's in management or even if you branch out and start doing your own thing, those are things that you can do. And everyone typically kind of thinks an engineer is an introvert, but oftentimes that just really means how you're recharging your batteries, and it doesn't mean you can't give a presentation or talk to people and get out there and do your stuff. It's just really kind of how you what are you doing to relax and recharge, and that's kind of what an introvert does. They want to go binge watch Netflix, Star Wars, or Mandalorian or something.
Yeah, people are always amazed when I tell them that I am like a huge introvert. Like, doing this podcast just drains me completely, and I just need to like take the rest of the day off and just go read a book or lay in bed. So yeah, that's another like misconception of engineers that I guess is not really a misconception that they're introverts, but the misconception of introverts not being able to do like public speaking or things like this. It's something that has nothing to do with being an introvert and extrovert. It just has to do with like you said, the way we recharge our energy, and there is a million psychological reasons for those things. But yeah, being an introvert does not really mean that I don't like public speaking or I don't enjoy it as much. It's just the way that I recharge my energy is different than an extrovert.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the difference between like management and leadership? We kind of touched on those two concepts briefly on the previous question, but what's the main difference between a manager and a leader?
Well, I think there's probably a few things. Like, a manager, they typically like administer things. They go out and get the task done, and a leader will typically innovate. They're forward thinking, and that kind of trickles down. So what happens is you end up having followers. If you're a leader, you end up having followers instead of having like subordinates or people that work under you. And so, a leader takes those kind of positions. There's a wonderful book that I read. There's all kinds of different ways of leading. But one of the books I really enjoyed was called Lincoln on Leadership. And they talk about how President Lincoln, how he was a leader, the way he leaded. And one of the methods is leading among the crowd, which means like this particular leadership style is he was going around and talking to people in the front lines, or really finding out what's going on out in the field, similar in a work position. And there are different types of leadership styles, but I really like the ones where a leader can get down and get to know who their people are and what they're working on the front lines of that people. So they're really people focused as well, instead of like work focused. Instead of work focused, they're kind of people focused. So anyway, those are my thoughts on those two topics. Those are things that you have to learn. Leadership, I think, is a skill that you learn as you're in a position to do that.
Yeah, that's a great, I think a great way just to end this episode, talking about all these process of like from student passing DFE, passing DP, and kind of beyond that, what comes after that. I just have one last question for you, and that's how can we continue engineering our future?
You can go to civilengineeringacademy.com and go pass your exams, and then you will engineer everyone's future.
Yeah. I think passing the exam is a huge milestone that really is just the springboard to so many things beyond what I could have imagined when I started my career as a student. So definitely a huge milestone, and I encourage people to do the best, pass the exam, and if you are even thinking of not taking it, I think that's a huge mistake, because even if you don't think you need it right now, you probably will need it down the road. So the earlier you get it done, the better it's going to be for your career. Isaac,
go get it.
Yeah. Isaac, just thank you for coming to the podcast. I'm excited to hear our episode together. I'll make sure I link that in the show notes whenever that comes out. And it's just been great to connect with you, talk with you about all of these things. I've been following you around with the Civil Engineering Academy for a little while, and it's just great to see all the work you do helping students and young engineers pass these really hard exams. So thank you so much for all of that. Where can people connect with you, find your courses, find your programs, resources, everything online?
Oh man, if you just go to civilengineeringacademy.com, you can go check out the courses through there. The podcast is on there too. If you just search for us on any podcast catcher, you'll find us, Civil Engineering Academy. And we have a good time. I try to make this fun. Civil engineering can be a dry topic, you know what I mean? So we have a good time, and I know how serious it can be. But yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, you can find us on all the social media channels as well. And feel free to email me if you have any questions. Isaac at civilengineeringacademy.com.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks about one of the things that I like to do with engineering our future. Just not focusing too much on the technical side. I think most engineers kind of know that already or can find that information elsewhere. But just helping engineers just become leaders and become just better overall engineers, which is always a lot of fun. So yeah, thanks for coming to the podcast. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
So there you have it. That was a conversation with Isaac today. Again, just a fantastic episode, an episode that I really enjoyed, an episode that I've been just meaning to do for a little while now, and it was just fantastic to see how his experience as someone that didn't really pass the exam on the first try, that someone that has poured hours, thousands of hours, helping hundreds and thousands of students pass this exam, and someone that is really invested into really helping these students pass. So it was great talking to Isaac. I really enjoyed the episode. I really resonated with some of his messages about just working hard. Like sometimes it's easy to forget what's really important in what you're doing. And what I mean by that is this exam is obviously a hard exam. We talk about passing rates, and we talk about some of the things that people kind of miss when they're studying for these. I think I've talked about this in previous episodes as well. It's just not really thinking that the exam, the grade, is the most important part. I think having the experience, having the process really guide you towards just becoming a better engineer, I believe that's even more valuable than the license at the end of the day. It was interesting to learn about the student who took the exam 8 times before they passed it, and it was just a really eye-opening experience. And I think that just hopefully it resonates with you. Hopefully you are listening to this, and if you think you didn't pass the first, second, third time, just make sure you put the time and effort. Reach out to Isaac. He has some amazing resources and just overall a great platform where he is really putting the time and effort to help you pass your exam. So if you have any question about the exam, just feel free to reach out to me. You probably noticed I put some effort in a few episodes about this specific topic, and it just brings me joy to help you in this process. A process was definitely not easy for me. There was a lot of effort, a lot of sacrifices, a lot of studying and everything. And I just want to help you pass the exam. I want to help you get all the resources you need, get all the studying you need, all the support you need. And yeah, make sure you reach out. I will continue putting some of these resources, articles, and podcast episodes. I'll try to just consolidate everything a little better in the future. But for now, just make sure you are subscribed to the podcast to get notified whenever new episodes come out. And I really hope you are enjoying the conversation. I really hope you are enjoying what I'm doing here with the podcast, with the show, bringing you all these resources and everything. And it's just been a pleasure to being able to talk with all these engineers, all these people that are doing just amazing things in the profession. So that's going to do it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. I really hope you took some value out of it. Make sure you check Isaac's website, check his courses, check everything he has going on around the P exam, and make sure you reach out to him if you have any questions, if you're thinking about taking the exam sometime soon. And overall, just really hope you're enjoying the podcast. Make sure you subscribe on any podcast platform you're listening from, and rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It really helps just get the show out there, help new people and find new engineers to empower and just overall reach out to even more people, which is a lot of fun. I've been getting some really cool messages on social media, through the email, through the newsletter, and it's just been a pleasure to kind of see the results behind what I'm doing with the podcast. And sometimes it just feels a little lonely just sitting here in front of the camera and just kind of talking by myself a lot of times, but it's really a pleasure to see how far this podcast is going and how many people we're reaching. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you, Jack Winders, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.